Imagine a family handpicked by God to carry the ultimate blessing for all of humanity. Yet, behind the sacred promises and divine covenants, there lies a dark, suffocating secret. A vibrant, blood-stained garment presented to a weeping father. An empty wooden chair that no one is allowed to sit in for 22 years. A gleaming silver cup pulled from a dusty sack of grain in the middle of the unforgiving desert. What happens when the very people entrusted with divine truth are trapped in a toxic, generational cycle of jealousy, betrayal, and deceit? For centuries, it has been easy to view the patriarchs of the Bible as flawless, untouchable figures carved from marble. But the historical and sacred texts preserve a much more devastating, intensely human reality, a family deeply familiar with the shadows of its own mistakes. We are about to uncover a moment when the ultimate test of faith wasn't facing a giant or crossing a sea, but confronting the terrifying ghosts of a family's own making. Will they repeat the catastrophic sins of their fathers? Or will one man finally step forward to shatter the cycle forever? The trembling hands of an elderly man clutch a piece of fabric in the dim, suffocating shadows of a desert tent. It is a long, intricately woven tunic, once vibrant with brilliant dyes of red, blue, and gold, marking the status of a favored son. But now, the fabric is stiff, matted, and deeply stained with the unmistakable oxidized rust of dried blood. The old man, Jacob, falls to his knees, burying his face in the ruined garment, his agonizing wails piercing the cold night air of the Canaanite desert. Standing just outside the light of the oil lamp are 10 of his older sons. They watch their father's world completely shatter. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The brothers stand in absolute, terrifying silence. They have just delivered the blood-soaked coat, allowing their father to draw the horrific conclusion that a wild beast has torn his favorite child, 17-year-old Joseph, to pieces. But the blood on the colorful fabric does not belong to a boy. It belongs to a slaughtered goat. This singular, chilling image, a father weeping over a lie, while the liars stand quietly in the shadows, is the epicenter of a sacred wound that has infected this family for generations. To understand the sheer gravity of this moment, we must recognize that this is not just any nomadic family. According to the biblical narrative, this is the chosen bloodline, the sacred lineage entrusted with the covenant of God. Yet, beneath the divine promises, a toxic, generational curse has been quietly metastasizing for decades. The inherited trauma of deceit and the lethal disease of favoritism. The historical record shows that this is a family deeply familiar with the shadows. Abraham, the great patriarch, lied about his wife to save his own life. His son Isaac repeated the exact same lie. Isaac's son Jacob, the man currently weeping on the floor, famously used the skin of a slaughtered goat to deceive his own blind father and steal his brother's blessing. And now, the cycle has ruthlessly turned back upon him. His own sons have used the blood of a goat to deceive him, stealing his most beloved possession. The micro-exclusion that birthed this tragedy was agonizingly visible every single day. Jacob did not merely love Joseph more. He weaponized that love, effectively treating his 10 older sons as second-class citizens in their own home. In the harsh, unforgiving environment of the ancient Near East, a patriarch's favor was not just a matter of emotional warmth. It dictated survival, inheritance, and authority. The brothers were humiliated, forced to watch the youngest parade around in a royal garment while they worked the fields. Their inner wound was a desperate, starving hunger to be seen, to be valued, to be loved by a father who looked right through them. Driven to the brink of madness by this sacred injustice, they committed an unthinkable betrayal. They stripped Joseph of his garment, threw him into a dark pit, and sold their own flesh and blood to passing Midianite merchants for 20 pieces of silver. Their first false explanation, the desperate belief that fueled their crime, was a tragic illusion. They convinced themselves that if the favorite son simply disappeared, the shadow he cast would vanish. They believed that by removing the source of their jealousy, their father would finally have no choice but to love them. They thought shedding this burden would bring them peace and restore their family. Instead, as they sit down in the dust outside the tent to eat their evening meal, the chilling shrieks of their father's unending grief echo against the desert rocks. The brothers realize with quiet, creeping terror that they have not freed themselves at all. They have merely traded the shadow of a favored brother for the inescapable, suffocating ghost of a murdered one. The lie has been spoken, the blood has dried, and the trap of their own making has violently snapped shut. The sun rises and sets over the hills of Hebron, turning days into weeks, weeks into months, and months into 2 agonizing decades. 22 years drag on with excruciating slowness. In Jacob's encampment, a terrible, heavy silence dictates every movement. The first visible layer of exclusion is a physical object that dominates the family's daily life. An empty wooden chair at the patriarch's table. No one is allowed to sit in it. No one is allowed to move it. It remains there, year after year, as a haunting monument to the family's original sin. Jacob refuses to be comforted. He wears sackcloth, walks with the posture of a dead man, and publicly declares that he will go down to his grave mourning for his son. For Judah and the 9 other brothers, the psychological prison is absolute. This is the bitter fruit of their false explanation. They had believed that erasing Joseph would secure their place in the family, but the exact opposite has occurred. The father they so desperately wanted to win over has retreated entirely into the past. Every time they sit down to eat, every time they look at Jacob's hollowed eyes, they are confronted with the horrifying reality of what they have done. The silence is deafening. They cannot confess, for the truth would surely kill the fragile old man. They cannot grieve, because their grief is a lie. They are trapped in a suffocating web of their own cowardice, enduring a daily, intimate exclusion from the very love they committed treason to obtain. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles to the south, beneath the scorching sun of the Egyptian Empire, the physical exclusion of the betrayed brother is total and absolute. Joseph has been stripped of his Hebrew name, stripped of his dignity, and erased from the memory of the living. We should be careful not to overstate what can be proven about the specific pharaoh of this era, as the historical record is debated, but the cultural reality of ancient Egypt is undeniable. To the Egyptians, a Canaanite nomad was the lowest of the low, a barbarian fit only for hard labor. Joseph is falsely accused of a crime he did not commit and thrown into the darkest, most wretched royal dungeon. Here, the sacred wound is completely torn open. The chosen family is violently severed. The perpetrators are living as ghosts in Canaan, and the victim is rotting in an Egyptian cell, entirely forgotten by the world. It is a season of profound spiritual darkness. God appears to be completely silent, his promises apparently buried in the desert sand alongside a bloody coat. Yet, this is the hidden truth that has not yet been revealed. The treacherous, brutal path of slavery and imprisonment is the exact, mysterious avenue God is utilizing to position Joseph at the epicenter of global power. The brothers' toxic attempt to destroy their family's future is actively being subverted by divine providence to save it. The long years of silence finally shatter when the skies dry up. A catastrophic famine, brutal and unyielding, sweeps across the ancient world. The pastures of Canaan turn to dust. The herds begin to die. The family of the covenant is pushed to the absolute brink of starvation. Jacob, desperate and fading, hears a rumor that there is grain stored in the vast storehouses of Egypt. He summons his sons and commands them to travel south to buy food, so that they may live and not die. He sends the 10 brothers, but fiercely protects his new favorite, Benjamin, Joseph's only full brother, refusing to let him out of his sight. Judah and his brothers pack their donkeys and begin the long, desolate trek toward the Egyptian border. They are walking to buy grain, completely unaware that with every step they take across the blistering sand, they are marching straight back into the heart of their own buried sins. They are walking toward the ghost they created 22 years ago. The grandeur of the Egyptian court is designed to crush the human spirit through sheer scale. Massive columns, painted with lapis lazuli and gold tower toward the ceiling. The air is thick with the dizzying scent of myrrh and the overwhelming display of imperial power. When the 10 dusty, exhausted Hebrew brothers are finally brought into the grand hall to purchase grain, they immediately drop to their knees and press their faces flat against the cold marble floor. Seated high above them on a throne of unimaginable authority is the vizier of Egypt, the second most powerful man on the face of the earth. He wears the fine linen garments of Egyptian royalty, a heavy gold chain around his neck, and his eyes are lined with thick kohl. The brothers tremble, not daring to look up. They do not know, and could not possibly fathom, that the magnificent ruler staring down at them is the 17-year-old boy they threw into a pit 22 years ago. They are fulfilling the exact prophetic dream they once tried to murder. The sacred wound deepens here, shifting from physical starvation to a terrifying psychological reckoning. Joseph recognizes them instantly. He sees the faces of the men who ignored his screams, the men who coldly ate a meal while he begged for mercy from the bottom of a dry well. The historical text notes that Joseph deliberately treats them as strangers. He speaks to them harshly, utilizing an interpreter to mask his native tongue, a profound micro-humiliation that emphasizes the impassable chasm between their lowly status and his supreme authority. He accuses them of being spies who have come to find the weaknesses of the land. He throws them into an Egyptian prison for 3 days. For the brothers, the terror is absolute. The darkness of the cell forces them to confront the intimate spiritual wound they have carried in silence for 2 decades. They are utterly isolated, terrified, and convinced that the universe has finally aligned to execute divine justice upon them. The theological dread sets in. They believe God has finally cornered them. When they are brought back before the vizier, the trauma of the past bleeds completely into the present. Standing before the unreadable Egyptian ruler, the brothers turn to one another and begin to speak in their native Hebrew, entirely unaware that the man on the throne understands every single syllable. The biblical narrative preserves this chilling, agonizing confession. Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. For 22 years, they had never spoken of it aloud. Now, the dam of guilt breaks open in a foreign court. Reuben, the oldest, twists the knife deeper. Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood. This is the hint of the hidden truth. Joseph is not subjecting them to cheap revenge. Some sources suggest this harshness is an act of cruelty, but deeper theological reflection reveals it is a necessary, excruciating spiritual surgery. Joseph needs to know if the generational curse still lives within them. Have they changed? Or are they still the same ruthless men who would sell a brother to save themselves? Hearing their raw, tortured confession, Joseph is overwhelmed. The facade of the hardened Egyptian ruler cracks. He cannot bear the weight of their remorse. He quickly turns away from them, leaving the throne room to weep in secret, the tears of a wounded boy falling onto the gold jewelry of an empire. He washes his face, suppresses his staggering emotion, and returns. He issues a devastating ultimatum. They may buy grain, but Simeon will be bound and kept as a hostage in Egypt. To prove they are not spies, they must return to Canaan and bring back their youngest brother, Benjamin. The brothers are paralyzed with horror. Taking Benjamin away from Jacob is the one thing they swore they would never do. The wound is torn wide open, and they are sent back into the desert, carrying grain that feels heavier than stones. The journey back to Canaan is a death march of the soul. When they arrive and empty their sacks of grain, another terrifying shock awaits them. The silver they used to pay for the food has been secretly placed back into their bags. Their hearts sink. They are now not just accused spies, but apparent thieves in the eyes of the Egyptian empire. They tell their father the vizier's demand. Jacob's reaction is violent and desperate. "You have deprived me of my children," he screams. "Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now, you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." Months pass, the grain runs out. The famine tightens its lethal grip on the family. Finally, Judah steps forward, taking the full weight of the generational curse upon his own shoulders. He looks at his broken father and makes a solemn vow. "Send the boy along with me. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him here before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life." It is a desperate, sacred pledge. Judah is risking his eternity to save his family. With trembling hands, they take double the silver. Their youngest brother, Benjamin, and travel back to the towering gates of Egypt. When they are brought to Joseph's house, they are terrified, expecting to be executed. Instead, they are treated to a lavish feast. They are seated exactly in the order of their birth, from oldest to youngest, a detail that leaves them staring at each other in bewildered astonishment. How could the Egyptian vizier possibly know their ages? Joseph, struggling to maintain his composure at the sight of his full brother Benjamin, has to flee the room again to weep in his private chambers. The next morning, the brothers are sent on their way at dawn, their donkeys loaded with as much food as they can carry. The relief is intoxicating. They have survived. Simeon has been released. Benjamin is safe. They are finally going home. The nightmare is over. But the relief is a masterfully engineered illusion. Joseph has instructed his steward to fill their sacks with food, put their silver back, and crucially, to place his own personal royal silver divination cup squarely into the mouth of Benjamin's sack. The brothers are barely out of the city when the thunder of Egyptian chariot wheels shakes the ground behind them. The steward intercepts them, his voice dripping with aristocratic contempt. "Why have you repaid good with evil? Why have you stolen the silver cup my master drinks from?" The brothers are genuinely outraged. They are innocent. They boldly declare that if the cup is found with any of them, that man shall die, and the rest will become slaves. The steward agrees to a lesser punishment. Only the man found with the cup will become a slave. The rest may go free. The search begins. It is an agonizing, methodical procedure. The steward opens the sack of the oldest, Reuben. Nothing. He moves to Simeon. Nothing. Down the line he goes, sack by sack, tearing through the burlap in the dust of the road. The anticipation is a suffocating weight. Finally, he reaches the youngest. He pulls open Benjamin's sack, reaches deep into the golden grain, and slowly pulls out the gleaming, undeniable proof of the empire's wrath. The royal silver cup. The metallic clink of the cup in the sunlight is the midpoint point of no return. It is the ultimate spiritual crisis. The brothers stare in sheer, paralyzed terror. The false explanation of their innocence is shattered. The system of justice demands blood. Here, the test engineered by Joseph reaches its climax. The trap is sprung. The historical force of their past has perfectly aligned with the present. The Egyptian steward tells the 9 older brothers they are free to go. Only Benjamin must stay and become a slave. This is the exact moment the generational curse demands to be repeated. 22 years ago, they threw the father's favorite son away and went on with their lives. Now, the universe has handed them a flawless, legal excuse to do it again. They can walk away, save their own lives, and let the favorite son perish in Egypt. The temptation to let history repeat itself hangs in the silent desert air. But instead of running, the brothers physically tear their clothes in violent, agonizing grief. They load their donkeys, turn around, and march straight back into the jaws of the empire, knowing it means the end of their lives. The heavy bronze doors of the vizier's palace slam shut behind them. The 10 brothers throw themselves onto the polished stone floor at Joseph's feet. The tension in the vast, echoing throne room is unbearable. This is the strongest public confrontation of the entire narrative. The vizier looks down at them, his face an impenetrable mask of absolute authority, and demands to know what they have done. Judah, the very man who, 2 decades earlier, had callously suggested selling Joseph to make a profit, raises his head. He does not plead innocence. He does not argue that the cup was planted. He looks into the eyes of the most terrifying man he has ever met and speaks a profound, devastating truth. "What can we say to my lord? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt." Judah is not confessing to stealing the cup. He is confessing to the murder of his brother 22 years ago. He is acknowledging that the universe demands a reckoning, and the time has come to pay the price. Joseph, testing them one final, agonizing time, declares his ruling. "Far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who was found with the cup will become my slave. The rest of you, go back to your father in peace." It is the perfect way out. The door to freedom is wide open. All they have to do is leave Benjamin behind in the dark. But Judah stands up. In an act of unparalleled courage, he steps forward, placing his own body between the towering throne of the Egyptian ruler and his terrified, trembling younger brother. The silence in the room is absolute, as a lowly Canaanite nomad dares to address the master of Egypt. Judah delivers a speech that remains one of the most heartbreaking pleas in the history of sacred literature. He meticulously recounts the intimate spiritual wound of their family. He tells the vizier about their elderly father, a man who has already been shattered by the loss of his beloved wife and his favorite son. He explains that Benjamin is the only piece of that love left in the world. His life is closely bound up with the boy's life, Judah says, his voice breaking. If the boy is not with us when I go back to your servant my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, sees that the boy isn't there, he will die. Judah exposes the catastrophic cost of their past cowardice. He refuses to let institutional neglect or spiritual blindness claim another victim. He refuses to let his father die of a broken heart. Then, the moral reversal occurs. Judah looks at the vizier and offers the ultimate substitutionary sacrifice. Now then, please let your servant remain here as my lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father. The cycle is broken. The generational curse of jealousy, selfishness, and deceit shatters into 1,000,000 pieces on the marble floor of the Egyptian court. Judah has chosen to forfeit his own freedom, his own future, and his own life to save the favored son. Upon hearing this, Joseph's emotional dam violently bursts. The 22 years of abandonment, the trauma of the pit, the darkness of the prison, and the terrifying loneliness of power all crash down upon him in a single, overwhelming wave. He can no longer control himself. He screams at his guards and officials, "Make everyone leave my presence." The Egyptians scatter in confusion. The heavy doors are bolted. Joseph is left entirely alone with the men who destroyed his life. He begins to weep, not quiet, dignified tears, but loud, guttural, agonizing wails that echo through the corridors of the palace so loudly that the pharaoh's household hears it. The brothers are frozen in terror, unable to comprehend what is happening. The magnificent Egyptian ruler steps down from his throne. He strips away the heavy facade of the empire, looks at the men cowering on the floor, and speaks to them in their own language. "I am Joseph," he gasps through his tears. "Is my father still alive?" The brothers cannot answer him. They are paralyzed by a terror so profound it steals the breath from their lungs. The revelation of the hidden truth is too massive, too terrifying to process. The boy they threw into the dirt now holds the power of life and death over the known world. By every law of the ancient Near East, by every instinct of human nature, this is the moment for absolute brutal revenge. They expect the guards to rush back in. They expect the executioner's blade. But justice in the sacred narrative is rarely what human nature expects. Justice here is not a cheap revenge. It is an incredibly costly grace. Joseph sees their terror. He steps closer to them, his voice softening into a plea of profound intimacy. "Come close to me," he asks. As they hesitantly step forward, he repeats the impossible truth. "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt." Then, Joseph delivers the theological reframing that alters the course of sacred history. He refuses to let them drown in their guilt. He points to the divine vindication that has orchestrated their lives. "And now, do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance." Later Christian memory preserves this moment as a foreshadowing of the ultimate redemption, where the brokenness of humanity is absorbed and transformed by divine grace. We must be careful not to overstate this as fatalism. God did not force the brothers to commit evil, but the staggering beauty of this restoration is that God's purpose is so powerful. It can take the most toxic, jagged pieces of a dysfunctional family and weave them into a tapestry of global salvation. "So then," Joseph concludes, "it was not you who sent me here, but God." Joseph throws his arms around Benjamin and weeps. Then he kisses all his brothers and weeps over them. Only after this embrace, after the forgiveness is physically bestowed, are the brothers finally able to speak. The psychological prison of 22 years crumbles. The silence is over. The specific restoration that follows is breathtaking in its symmetry. The brothers had once stripped Joseph of his beautiful garment and sent him away as a slave to die. Now Joseph gives each of his brothers a change of luxurious clothing, and to Benjamin he gives 5 sets of garments and 300 shekels of silver. He commands them to return to Canaan and bring their father, their families, and all they own down to the best land in Egypt, where he will personally provide for them. The story concludes with an image of overwhelming, emotional vindication. Back in Canaan, the old man Jacob sits in the dust, waiting for a death he believes is imminent. Suddenly, the horizon begins to shift. Emerging from the heat waves of the desert is not a small caravan of returning nomads, but a massive convoy of imperial power. The final symbolic image is a line of grand, ornate Egyptian wagons, loaded with the finest grain, gold, and provisions, rolling through the barren wilderness of Canaan. They have been sent by the master of the world to carry a broken old man toward the son he thought was dead. When Jacob is told that Joseph is still alive and is the ruler of all Egypt, he is stunned, his heart almost stopping. But when he sees the royal wagons his son has sent to carry him, his spirit revives. The empty chair will finally be filled. The bloodline is redeemed. The generational curse has been utterly broken by the unimaginable, restorative power of grace. The story of Joseph and his brothers is far more than an ancient historical account of Middle Eastern famine and Egyptian politics. It is a profound exploration of inherited trauma, the heavy burden of memory, and the agonizing cost of grace. For decades, this family was imprisoned by the wounds of favoritism and the devastating silence of an unconfessed lie. It is easy to look at the older brothers simply as villains, but from a deeper perspective, they were desperate, broken men starved for a father's love, caught in a cycle of deception they did not know how to escape. Some might argue that Joseph's harsh testing of his brothers in the Egyptian court was a form of manipulation, while others see it as a necessary, painful spiritual surgery to ensure the disease of jealousy was truly cured before reconciliation could occur. Regardless, this narrative forces us to confront a difficult spiritual truth. Time does not heal all wounds, it merely buries them. For 22 years, the brothers lived in a psychological prison, proving that avoiding the truth is often more agonizing than facing it. True restoration only became possible through 2 staggering acts of moral courage. First, Judah's willingness to step into the place of his brother, offering his own life to halt the toxic cycle of self-preservation. Second, Joseph's unimaginable choice to wield his absolute power not for a justified, symmetrical revenge, but for radical mercy. Ultimately, this story reveals the breathtaking mystery of divine providence. It reminds us that God is not intimidated by the dysfunction, the brokenness, or the toxic cycles that have followed our families for generations. He does not cause our betrayals, but in his infinite mercy, he can take the shattered, blood-stained pieces of our worst failures and weave them into a legacy of salvation. Thank you for walking through this profound chapter of sacred history with us. If this exploration of generational healing and divine providence moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which moment of this story resonated with you the most? Was it the suffocating silence of the brothers' 22-year secret, Judah's sacrificial step forward, or Joseph's agonizing choice to forgive the unforgivable? Have you ever witnessed a toxic, generational cycle being broken in your own life or family? Your insights make this community richer, so please share your reflections. And make sure you have your notifications turned on, because in our next video, we are unearthing another forgotten memory from the ancient texts, a moment where a single, whispered prayer in the dead of night forever altered the fate of an empire. You won't want to miss it.